Hey, welcome back. Next part in the coffee table series. Today we're going to do some final work on the central division, get this frame sanded, get the frame assembled and put those end legs onto it. That sounds good? Stick around. Welcome back to the Woodgrafter. I'm Andy Gile and our mission here is to inspire, educate and support you in your journey to becoming a better woodworker. We do that through a whole series of videos, project videos, how to build something, video series like this one. We also do tool tips, techniques, reviews, news from the industry and just get together really and have a bit of a chat. So if you're not a subscriber, subscribe now, leave me your thumbs up, leave a comment and get in touch, and with that said, let's get going. So in the last episode we were working on this centre panel. That's all come out the clamps now and it's all glued up. And all I've done here is I've just assembled the frame so I can see what I'm up to. And what I'm looking for are any gaps, or ideally no gaps. I don't want any gaps in this joinery when it comes together. I want these end panels to be flush against the legs. I want these joints to be nice and tight, and similarly these joints here to be nice and tight. So I just drop a bit of clamping pressure on just to give me a friction fit so I can check that out. And this is looking absolutely splendid. So now to start to bring the frame together. Now it's not hard, but there's a few things we just need to look out for. Now these end pieces here are going to be dominoed into the appropriate part of the leg. Now that means there's going to be a mortise cut in these end pieces with the domino jointer. But I still need to think of how I'm going to attach these on. Because if I put a domino in here, then that domino from there will interfere with that mortise and give me a weak joint. So I want an invisible way of fastening these pieces in. So what I'm going to do is pocket hole screws, and I know I'll probably get abused for this, but this has got no weight on it at all. It's purely decoration. So I'm going to pocket hole screw that into the end, leaving room in the middle of the pocket hole screws for the mortise to fit this into the legs. So let's weigh that up and see what we can do. The way I'm thinking of doing this, I'm going to cut the domino holes first of all in these end pieces, and then I can attach these dominoes in and glue those into position. I can then cut the pocket hole screws in the back of this one, trying to get close to the edge but not making this material split or blow out, and then when I actually screw that piece together it will screw into this as well as into the domino, and that's going to give me a very secure fitting. So we'll start by cutting the domino pieces into the end of this. So with those mortises now cut, I want to come in and glue in the dominoes into position. Let's do that. A bit hard trying to do this to the camera, so bear with me and tap it home. Now, what I do want to make sure here, see this squeeze out, I don't want any squeeze out on this. So I'm coming with a slightly damp rag and I'm just taking that squeeze out of the equation. Now that's important you do that, because we're going to allow these to dry before we do the next step, and any glue therefore that's in here that dries will keep the joint apart. Just keep cleaning. The glue will seep out of this because obviously you put pressure on these dominoes as you've knocked them in, so that glue will continue to seep out for a couple of seconds, so just keep your eye on it, as I say, and I don't really want any squeeze out. We will clean it up with a chisel before we do the final assembly, but we'll make life easy for ourselves. So you do the same with all the others. Now while that's drying, we may as well cut the dominoes in the top part of the legs. Now we know that these dominoes here are going to go into this side of the leg, so this will be positioned like so. Now I also know that we've just made these lines, the centre point of the dominoes, 18mm from these outside edges. And we also know there's a 2mm shadow line between this edge and this edge. So if I was to come in from this edge by 20 millimeters and that became the center point of my mortise, we know this would line up perfectly and give me the 2 millimeters. I'll also use the slightly wider setting on the domino, and that gives me a bit of adjustment room left and right. Now we also know that the center point of the domino from this top face was actually set by this 16 millimeter stop here on the domino. So I can set the center point of my domino this way by using the same stop on the domino. So if I mark a line 20 millimeters in, allow this to give me the distance down, that should be perfectly aligned, and when this is fitted in, it should be flush with these top surfaces. Now we're going to be using the domino in this plane to cut that, so I need to put my center points on the top of these legs, which is quite good because that mark will never be seen. So we're not just going to undo all that great sanding that we've just been working on. This is the only problem with the Inca rule. Do you see how that flops down? It stops it coming back again, can knock you out. So you've got to just work around that. And there's my 20 millimeter mark. So I now come in with my domino onto that mark. That's going to line up that mortise perfectly for us. Happy days. So now we can go back to these end caps and look at the pocket hole joinery. Let's do that. So I've set up the jig for a 16 millimeter cut. We know this is 18 millimeters, and I've got a scrap piece of stock. It's the same thickness and same width to the actual one we're going to use. And I just want to do a few test cuts on this one because I don't want to get it wrong. Eyeing on the table here, just lining up what that domino is going to be. Now I don't mind if this screws in through that domino, it'll give it extra strength and won't damage the joint in any way. So I'm just going to take these lines now and use those as my marking lines. One there, and then I'll make a second cut there. So I just want to make a test cut and see what that looks like. And you can see that's not too bad, so I'll do a second one here and see how that one looks. And there you go, that's going to give me a nice flush surface. It's going to give me a square joint, providing those ends of the wood are square, of course, and it's strong enough. Now obviously those pocket screws will then be against that leg, all glued together, and they will never ever be seen. And that just gives us a little bit of structural support onto this end piece. And as I say, there's no structure on this, it's purely decorative, but it just helps us and holds everything in position. And that's going to look pretty good. So I can now go ahead and put all the pocket hole screws in all those end caps. Good stuff. So with that done, I can now fit these to the H-frames. Now obviously what's important is that this is the right way up, and that this outside edge here lines up with this outside edge here, and that this top piece is flush with the shoulder of what is now your tenon. So the next job is to drop these into place. Let me show you the easiest way that I found of doing this. Obviously I lie this on a stable surface. Ideally I'd bring the bench out a little bit more, but we'll be okay. Clamp this into position so I know it's not going to move for me. Obviously a piece of scrap wood in place so I don't damage the material. And what I do is I bring this up, not worried about position so far, and just put a light bit of clamping pressure on that, just so it holds everything in place for me. And now I can move this round, and what I'm looking for is for this outside face here to be flush with this outside face, and it is, and this face here to be flush with the shoulder of the tenon, and that's good there. And then I can lightly increase the clamping pressure, and now that's not going to move. And a final check, all looking pretty good. Now with the frame coming together, the next job is to drop in the centre panel. Now I've made a whole catalogue of errors on this I now need to work through, but again it's good learning experience. First thing I want to do is to find the centre of this, because the centre panel goes well in the centre. So the centre of this piece of material is a position it's going to go into So that's the centre point. So I can now bring this centrepiece into position. Just going to now just lightly mark the outside edges of that stock, so I now know where that's going to be. So I now know the position of this on the top frame. Now here's a mistake that I've made. As you can see, this domino here is offset from the middle, and that would make sense because I cut the domino before I thicknessed the stock to bring all this down nice and smooth. So this is no longer in the center point. So I cannot rely on putting a domino in that center point and expecting this to line up. Instead, I'm going to have to come in from one of these edges that I just made. Now this is a 6mm domino, so we know that from the center point here to this edge will be 5 plus 3, 3½ of 6. That would be 8mm. So I've got to offset this domino center from this edge by 8mm. Now on this edge here, you can see this is more in the center than the one over there. From this top edge, it's about 4½, and from this edge here, it's 5. So in this scenario, I want to come in 8mm from this edge. So I made it a little bit hard for myself. The other thing I've done is I didn't allow for this offset here of this shoulder, and I cut these dominoes at a 20mm depth, thinking that the dominoes are 40mm and half of 40mm is 20mm. But this material is only 18mm thick nominally. So if I was to go ahead now and put a 20mm hole inside here, then that would punch all the way through, and that's not what we want. So what I need to do is to punch this one through to say about 15mm, and the 15mm in this one and the 20 in this one is 35, and my dominoes are 40mm. So I need to bring these down and cut these off to shorten them a little bit. So that's a mistake that I made. So it's not a big problem, but I just didn't think that through very well. I should have taken the dominoes a bit deeper, and I should have ensured that these end pieces here were orientated in the right direction to give me a consistent offset. Hey ho, live and learn. Now I know where the center points are, I can now take the frame apart again, and I can use that to line up the next domino cut. So I want to take this line here and just transfer it round the material, because we know that's our reference line. And then I want to take this line and transfer that one round the material. And on this one we know we want an 8mm offset in that direction, because that's what we marked up to get to the center point. And on this one we need an 8mm offset in that direction. The offset between this face here, this reference face here, and the center of a cutter is 10mm, and we need from that line an offset of 8mm. So in theory, if I bring this line here, the one we just made, that needs the offset 8mm to give us the center, by 2mm, so there, and then I line the base of the domino up with that line there, then this will cut a center exactly where we need it, i.e. 8mm from that line, and that will then line up with the board, and that will be good. It's a bit complicated, but I've now got to the point where I know where my dominoes are going to go. Let me talk you through that again. I found the center point of the material. I then lined our panel up and made a mark for the left hand side and the right hand side, and similarly a mark for the left hand side and the right hand side. I then looked at the position of my domino, and I realised my domino was offset by 5mm, it wasn't center. So this is 5mm from here to here, and from here to the centre of the domino is 3mm, because this is a 6mm cutter. 5 plus 3 is 8mm. So from that centre line, I then moved a line back by 8mm. The problem I've got with the domino is this reference face here, and the centre point of the domino is 10 millimeters, which is 2 millimeters more than the 8 I'm looking for. So I then tracked that 8 millimeter line all the way around the material, and then I drew another line next to it 2 millimeters over. I then found the center point of the material there. So now when I line the base of my domino up with that reference line that's now 10 millimeters from where I actually need to cut, hold it square, that's where I'm going to plunge my domino in, and that's going to give me exactly what I need. I'm also going to do it on a slightly wider setting, and I'm only going to come through probably about 15 millimeters. So everything now cut, lined up, and these dominoes cut down to length, I just want to do a test fit. So the base is facing up, the front's towards me. Okay, top facing up, the front towards me. And that looks okay. And these end pieces here, whoa, happy days. Whoa. Yeah, so a few mistakes on that one, but we managed to recover. So with that done, we can now glue this up. Yes, let's get that done. Woohoo! So there you go, the inner frame is now all done, all glued together. So the final couple of jobs on the main table body is to bring this into the two end panels and fix the top to the overall frame. I think we'll look at that on the next episode. See you then.